This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags and get out. William's voice thundered through my living room as I stood frozen in the doorway, still wearing the black funeral dress from yesterday. I watched in stunned silence as he barked orders at his sons to carry out my late grandmother's antique rocking chair, the one David had cherished for his evening reading sessions. "You have no right to be here," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around me. William turned to face me, his weathered face twisted with satisfaction. "No right? This is family property, girl. Always has been, always will be. David is gone now, and you're not blood. Simple as that. I am Emily Morrison, 37 years old, and until yesterday, I thought I understood my place in this world. For 8 years, I had been married to David Morrison, a gentle soul who worked as a veterinarian here in Charleston, South Carolina. We had built what I believed was a beautiful life together in the historic Southern colonial house his grandfather had left him. But as I watched William's other sons, Andrew and Christopher, hauling my belongings toward the front door, I realized how naive I had been about his family's true feelings toward me. The morning after laying my husband to rest, I had returned home from my sister's house to find the locks changed, and the Morrison men treating my home like their personal storage unit. William stood in the center of it all, orchestrating the removal of my life, as if I were nothing more than a temporary tenant whose lease had expired. "David wouldn't want this," I whispered, my hands trembling as I watched them stack my wedding photos carelessly on the porch. "David is dead," William snapped. "And he was too soft-hearted when it came to you. We told him from the beginning you were only after the family money, but he wouldn't listen. Well, that charade is over now." The words hit me like physical blows. 8 years of Sunday dinners where I was tolerated, but never welcomed. 8 years of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. 8 years of being treated like an outsider at my own husband's family gatherings. I had endured it all because David asked me to, because he believed his family would eventually come around. Andrew appeared beside his father, breathing heavily from moving furniture. "Most of her stuff is out, Dad. What about the kitchen things?" "Take what's valuable, leave the rest," William replied without even glancing at me. "She can have until sunset to collect whatever junk we don't want." As I stood there watching them dismantle my life, something cold settled in my chest. They had underestimated me completely, just as they always had. But what they didn't know was that David had never underestimated them at all. What they couldn't possibly imagine was that my quiet, gentle husband had spent the last months of his life building an impenetrable fortress around me. One that would shatter their assumptions and reveal just how deeply David had understood his family's cruelty. That my relationship with the Morrison family had been strained from the very beginning. When David first brought me home to meet his parents 8 years ago, the reception was arctic at best. I was a nurse from a middle-class family, someone who had worked her way through nursing school at the Medical University of South Carolina, and earned everything I had. To William and his wife, Catherine, I was clearly beneath their veterinarian son, who came from 3 generations of property owners in Charleston's historic district. "She's very practical," Catherine had said that first evening, her tone making it sound like a disease. I was helping clear the dinner dishes while David spoke with his father about expanding the veterinary practice. "I suppose that's important in your line of work." The subtle digs continued through our courtship and into our marriage. They never missed an opportunity to mention the daughters of their country club friends. Girls who had gone to Clemson or the University of Virginia, and came from established low-country families. When David and I announced our engagement, William's first question wasn't about our happiness, but about the prenuptial agreement. "You understand, Emily, that family property has been passed down through generations," he had said during what he called our pre-wedding discussion. "The house, the land, the practice, these things stay within the bloodline. David is young and romantic, but business is business." David had grown uncomfortable during that conversation, shifting in his chair beside me. "Dad, we don't need to discuss this now." "Actually, we do," William continued. "Emily seems like a sensible girl. I'm sure she understands the importance of preserving family legacy." I had nodded politely, not wanting to cause problems for David, but inside I was seething. The way William spoke about me, as if I were a gold digger plotting to steal their precious legacy, made my stomach turn. What they didn't realize was that I had never wanted their money or their property. I had fallen in love with David because of his kindness, his dedication to healing animals, and his gentle spirit. But David saw how his family treated me. He noticed the way conversations became stilted when I joined them, how Thanksgiving invitations came with subtle suggestions that I might prefer to work that holiday shift instead. He watched his mother rearrange seating at family dinners, so I was always placed at the far end of the table. Most importantly, he heard the comments they made when they thought he wasn't listening. "Son, you could do so much better," Catherine had said one Sunday afternoon while I was in the kitchen preparing sweet tea. I heard every word through the thin walls of their Mount Pleasant home. "That girl is nice enough, I suppose, but she's not our kind of people." David had defended me that day, his voice firm. "Mother, Emily is exactly my kind of people. She's caring, hardworking, and she makes me happy. That should be enough." "Happiness is wonderful, dear, but compatibility matters too. Think about your children, your future. Don't you want someone who can truly be part of this family?" The moment that changed everything happened 3 months before David died. There really are deposits in my account. We had attended his cousin's wedding at the Charleston Yacht Club every month. Another Morrison family gathering where I played my usual role as the polite outsider. "I told you we've been taking care of you," during the reception, relief evident in his voice. To use the restroom, "But Dad," and returned to find the family huddled in deep conversation about estate planning near the bar. I never noticed when David goes, $2,400 a month to the family, right? To me, Christopher was finding his father in my couch cushions. I mean, she's not actually entitled to anything long-term. Is she? That small. Don't be ridiculous. Complete silence. William on the other end of the line. His voice low but clear. "Nora," wives get temporary rights. "What do you mean family property always returns to blood? Do you want to know what I actually do for work? Emily will get whatever David leaves her in personal effects," he said confidently. "The house, the land, the practice, I run 3 technology companies. That all comes back where it belongs," I said. Last year nodded approvingly. My combined revenue was just over $150 million. Complications with her involved. The silence stretched so long, the only complication, I thought the call had dropped. Catherine added with venom in her voice. "Are you still there?" "Is getting her to leave peacefully when the time comes. I'm not how these types can be when money is involved. Do you want me to email you my tax returns from last year?" The casual way they discuss my future widowhood. As if David's death was an inevitability they were already planning around. My liquid assets across made my blood run cold. "Dad, but what shocked me most was their complete certainty that I had no legitimate claim to the life David and I had built together. Currently has a balance of $6.8 million. That's just my spending money for day-to-day expenses." "That's impossible," he said weakly. "Want me to prove it?" I asked. "What exactly is Derek's new business?" "He's opening a craft brewery specializing in Colorado Mountain Alesh," Dad said. "He says it's going to revolutionize the microbrewery scene in the Rocky Mountain region. The company is called Peak Valley Brewing." I quickly pulled up my investment tracking software and ran a search through my portfolio companies. "Dad, what did you say the name was again?" "Peak Valley Brewing. Why are you asking?" I found exactly what I was looking for and started laughing so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. "Dad, I own Peak Valley Brewing." The silence was deafening. "What did you just say?" "Derek approached me 6 months ago looking for investors," I explained. "I liked his business plan and his passion for craft brewing, so I funded his entire operation through one of my investment firms. I currently own 70% of the company." "You're telling me," my father said very slowly, "that Derek used your trust fund money to start a business that you already own?" "There was no trust fund money, Dad. Derek used the investment capital that I gave him as his primary investor to start the business that I'm already funding and majority own." The revelation was complete, but the real shock was still coming. "I don't understand any of this," Dad said, and I could hear genuine confusion in his voice. "Here's what actually happened," I explained patiently. "You and Mom have been taking $2,400 out of your own retirement savings every month and depositing it into my account, believing it was money from an inheritance that never existed. Meanwhile, I've been funding Derek's brewery venture through my investment company, not knowing you thought you were using my money to do the exact same thing." I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting as he tried to process this information. "Nora, if you're really making that kind of money, why do you live in that modest house? Why do you drive that old Toyota Camry?" "Because I don't need material possessions to validate my success," I said simply. "The house is comfortable and perfect for my lifestyle. The Toyota is reliable and gets excellent gas mileage. Why would I waste money on status symbols that don't improve my life?" "But we thought, your mother and I assumed. You assumed I was struggling financially because I don't live extravagantly," I finished for him. "You created an entire fictional story about me needing your financial support when in reality, You've been giving me money I never asked for and didn't need. How long have you been? I mean, when did your companies become successful? My first company took off about 5 years ago. The other two followed within 2 years. Dad, I've been wealthy significantly longer than you've been sending me these payments. I was already a multimillionaire when you started your monthly deposits. Why didn't you tell us about your success? He asked, and I could hear hurt creeping into his voice that I considered the question carefully, trying to find a way to answer honestly without sounding bitter or resentful. When would I have told you? You and Mom never ask about my work except to wonder aloud when I'm going to find a stable career with benefits. Derek's the entrepreneurial one in the family, remember? I'm just the daughter who plays around with computers. We never said that, Nora. For months ago at Derek's housewarming party, you introduced me to his neighbor as our daughter who's still trying to find her path in life. Silence. Last Christmas, Mom asked me if I'd considered going back to school to get an MBA, so I could find a real job in the corporate world. More silence. And literally 10 minutes ago, you called my company's little computer projects and website design hobby. The weight of years of dismissal hung in the air between us. But the biggest revelation was yet to come. Nora, we had no idea, Dad said quietly. That's exactly my point, Dad. You had no idea because you never bothered to learn what I actually do for a living. You made assumptions based on my lifestyle choices and never questioned them, even when evidence suggested otherwise. I heard Mom's voice in the background asking who Dad was talking to for so long. Put Mom on speaker, I said that a moment later. Mom's familiar voice came through clearly. Nora, sweetheart, is everything all right? Your father's been on this call for almost an hour. Hi, Mom. Dad was just explaining how you two have been sending me monthly payments from a trust fund that doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? She asked, immediately defensive. Your great-aunt Eleanor left you that money in her will. Mom, great-aunt Eleanor died with about $12,000 in her savings account and a small mortgage on her condo. There was no trust fund. There was barely an estate. But the lawyer said. What lawyer? Mom, I was at the reading of her will. I inherited her car, her cedar chest, and her collection of vintage costume jewelry. That's it. I could hear my parents whispering urgently to each other. Then where did we get the idea that there was money? Mom asked, sounding genuinely perplexed. I have no clue. But you've been taking $2,400 out of your own retirement savings every month and giving it to me for 3 years. That's over $86,000 of your own money. Oh dear God, Mom whispered. Plus the $175,000 you just gave Derek, which brings your total to over $260,000. You've essentially given me almost $250,000 of your own nest egg while thinking it was my inheritance. Nora, we can't afford that, Mom said. And I could hear real panic in her voice. I know, Mom. Which is why I'm going to transfer $350,000 into your joint account this afternoon to cover everything you've given me, plus interest, plus extra for your trouble. You can't just transfer $350,000, Dad protested. Dad, would you like to see my investment portfolio? Yes, I think we need to see it, Mom said firmly. I pulled up my wealth management dashboard, took a screenshot and sent it to both their phones. Check your text messages. I waited while they opened the image. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear their old grandfather clock ticking in the background. Is this real? Mom's voice was barely audible. Those are real numbers. Yes. Total liquid assets of $428 million across various accounts and investments, not including the value of my companies themselves. The truth was finally out. But the most touching part of our story was still to unfold. $428 million, Dad said slowly, like he was testing how the words felt. Give or take a few million depending on how the stock market's performing on any given day. Nora, Mom said carefully, what exactly do you do for work? I develop software solutions for large corporations. I explained. My first company creates advanced logistics management systems for major retailers like Walmart and Costco. My second company handles cybersecurity for hospitals and healthcare networks across the Mountain West. My newest company focuses on artificial intelligence applications for supply chain optimization. How many people work for you? Dad asked. Across all 3 companies, I employ about 950 people directly, plus several hundred contractors and consultants. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear my neighbor's lawnmower through the walls. Nora, Mom finally said, we owe you the biggest apology of our lives. For what exactly? For treating you like a child who needed our financial guidance, Dad said. For not taking your career seriously. For assuming you were unsuccessful just because you don't show off your wealth. And for spending your money on Derek's business without consulting you first, Mom added. There was no money to spend, Mom. You gave Derek your own retirement savings while believing it was mine. But yes, you should have asked before making that decision, even if the money had been real. Actually, I said, this whole situation worked out better than you realize. Derek's brewery is doing phenomenally well, and now he has funding from two sources, his investment from me through my firm and his loan from you. When we take the company public in 12 months, you're going to get your money back with a substantial return. Derek's company is going public? Dad asked, incredulous. The craft brewery concept is just phase 1, I explained. We're expanding into can distribution, restaurant partnerships, and eventually franchise locations across Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Conservative projections value the company at around $65 million within 2 years. And you own most of this company. I own 70%, which means Derek's success is directly tied to my success. I've been mentoring him on business strategy and helping him avoid the mistakes that sank his previous ventures. I could hear them whispering to each other again, probably trying to process everything I'd told them. Nora, Mom said, I have to ask, if you've been this successful for years, why didn't you ever tell us? The question I'd been dreading, but the answer would bring us closer than we'd ever been. I thought carefully about how to answer that question honestly. Because your love for me never seemed connected to my professional achievements. You loved me for who I am as a person, and I was afraid that knowing about the money might change that dynamic. That's ridiculous, Dad said immediately. We're proud of you no matter what you accomplish. Are you really? I challenged gently. Because 15 minutes ago you dismissed my work as computer projects and you spent 3 years assuming I needed you to manage my finances because I couldn't handle adult responsibilities. They had no response to that observation, which was answer enough. Look, I'm not angry about any of this, I continued. It's actually kind of endearing in a bizarre way, but it does highlight how little attention you've paid to my actual life and career over the past few years. How can we fix this? Mom asked earnestly. Start by asking me about my work instead of making assumptions, I suggested. Ask me about my business goals, my challenges, my recent successes. Treat me like the adult professional I've become instead of like your daughter, who still needs guidance figuring out her life. We can do that, Dad promised. And maybe consider that just because someone chooses to live modestly doesn't mean they're struggling financially. Wealth doesn't have to be visible to be real. You're absolutely right, Mom agreed. We made too many wrong assumptions. Also, I need you to call Derek today and explain the situation to him, I said. He needs to understand that the money you gave him came from your retirement account, not from my inheritance. He needs to start making payments back to you immediately, regardless of how well the business is doing. We'll call him this afternoon. Dad promised. I glanced at my computer screen and noticed I had another investor call starting soon. I need to wrap this up. I have a video conference with potential partners in Silicon Valley in 20 minutes. Of course, sweetheart, Mom said. Nora, thank you for being so understanding about this whole mess. Thank you both for trying to take care of me even when I didn't need it. It shows how much you love me, and that matters more than any amount of money. We do love you, and we're incredibly proud of everything you've built, Dad said. And for the first time in the conversation, I heard genuine pride in his voice. I love you too, and I'm proud of you both for raising a son with the vision and courage to start his own business, even if the funding got a little complicated along the way. After I hung up, I sat back in my desk chair and shook my head, smiling. Of all the ways I'd imagined my parents discovering my financial success, this certainly wasn't one of them. But as ridiculous as the entire situation had been, there was something genuinely touching about the fact that they'd been quietly trying to support me for years. Even when that support was completely unnecessary, I opened my banking app and initiated the transfer to their joint account. $350,000 would more than cover what they'd given me, plus interest, plus extra to compensate for the stress of thinking they'd lost my inheritance money. Then I called my assistant to push back the Silicon Valley meeting by 30 minutes. I had one more family call to make first. 2 months later, my parents visited my actual office for the first time. All 12,000 square feet of it, occupying an entire floor of Denver's premier technology center. They met my executive team, toured our development labs, and sat in on a company meeting where we announced our expansion into the Pacific Northwest market. "Nora," Mom said as we stood in my corner office overlooking downtown Denver, "I can't believe we never asked to see where you work." "You never asked because you thought I worked from my spare bedroom," I pointed out with a smile. "We were so wrong about everything," Dad said, studying the wall of awards and recognition plaques. Denver Business Journal's Entrepreneur of the Year, the Governor's Award for Technology Innovation, the Mayor's Award for Job Creation. "How did we miss all of this?" he asked, turning to face me. "You saw what you expected to see instead of looking at what was actually there," I said simply. "Well, we're looking now," Mom said firmly. "And we couldn't be more proud." "Good," I said, "because Peak Valley Brewing is opening its flagship taproom next month, and Derek wants you both there for the grand opening as his business partners." "Business partners?" Dad asked, confused. "I convinced Derek to give you a 12% stake in the company in exchange for your initial investment. When we go public next year, your $175,000 will be worth approximately $2.8 million. Dad sat down heavily in one of my office chairs. "Nora, this is too generous." "No, it's not. It's what families do for each other. We take care of each other, even when that care takes unexpected forms." I walked over to my desk and picked up the only personal item in my otherwise professional office space. A framed photo of our family from last Thanksgiving. All of us laughing around the dinner table after Derek had told one of his terrible jokes. "You know what the best part of this whole crazy situation is?" I asked them. "What's that?" Mom replied. "You loved me and supported me even when you thought I was unsuccessful. That's the kind of family worth building a business empire for." And as I looked at my parents, really looked at them, maybe for the first time as the successful adult I'd become, I realized that all the money in the world couldn't buy what I already had. A family that loved me unconditionally, even when they didn't understand me. Everything else really was just pocket change. Slipped back into the bathroom and stayed there until my hands stopped shaking. When I finally returned to the reception, I found David chatting with his elderly uncle about new surgical techniques for treating injured pelicans. His face lit up when he saw me, and he immediately pulled me into the conversation. "Uncle Robert was just telling me about the sea turtle they brought in last week," David said, his eyes bright with professional interest. "Emily, you remember that case where the patient came in with similar flipper damage? That night, as we drove home over the Ravenel Bridge, the Cooper River glittering below us, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the months to come." "David," I said carefully, "I overheard your family talking about estate plans tonight." He glanced at me, his expression immediately growing serious. "What did they say?" "They seemed very confident about what happens to our property if something happens to you." David was quiet for a long moment, the lights of Charleston's historic district reflecting in his eyes. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Emily, I need to tell you something. I've been putting off some important legal matters, but I think it's time we had a serious conversation about our future." That conversation would change everything. The conversation that night revealed a side of David I had never fully understood. As we sat in our kitchen, he poured himself a glass of bourbon and took a deep breath. "I've known for years how my family feels about you," he began, his voice heavy with sadness. "I kept hoping they would change, that they would see what I see in you. But after tonight, I realized they never will." "David, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "Emily, my family has been planning for your departure since the day we got married. They've convinced themselves that you're temporary, that you'll somehow disappear when it becomes convenient for them." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden we had planted together, magnolias and camellias that bloomed in the Charleston spring. "They're operating under some archaic notion that family property automatically reverts to blood relatives when I die. They have no idea how inheritance law actually works, and they've never bothered to ask about my will." My heart began to race. "You have a will?" David turned back to me, and I saw something I had never seen before in his eyes. a steely determination that reminded me he was, after all, a Morrison. I've had a will since the week after we got married. But 3 months ago, after that conversation with my cousin about his upcoming wedding, I decided it wasn't comprehensive enough. He walked to his study and returned with a folder thick with legal documents. I've been working with Benjamin Harper downtown. Do you remember him? He handled the Andersons' divorce last year. I nodded, remembering the prominent estate attorney who had helped our neighbors through a complicated property dispute. Benjamin helped me understand something important, David continued. My family's assumptions about inheritance are not just wrong, they're legally meaningless. When we got married, I immediately changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. That means everything automatically becomes yours if I die first. The weight of what he was saying began to sink in. But David, your family doesn't know this? They have no idea. And that's not all. He opened the folder and spread several documents across our kitchen table. I've drafted a comprehensive will that leaves you everything. The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments, everything. More importantly, I've included specific language about why I'm making these decisions. He handed me a letter written in his careful handwriting. As I read it, tears began to fill my eyes. To my family, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to protect Emily from your cruelty. For 8 years, I have watched you treat my wife as an outsider, someone unworthy of basic respect, let alone love. 6 weeks after that conversation, David was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came after what he thought was just persistent heartburn from too many late-night emergency calls at the clinic. How long? I asked Dr. Sullivan, my voice barely a whisper. 6 months, maybe 8 if we're aggressive with treatment, she replied gently, her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Emily. I wish I had better news. David took the news with characteristic calm, immediately shifting into planning mode. That evening, as we processed the devastating diagnosis in our sunroom overlooking the garden, he called Benjamin Harper. Benjamin, it's David Morrison. We need to expedite those estate documents we discussed. Yes, it's urgent. Over the next 2 weeks, while David began chemotherapy at MUSC, we spent our evenings updating and finalizing his will. Benjamin came to our house 3 times, bringing additional paperwork and ensuring every detail was properly documented. David, I want to add one more provision, Benjamin suggested during his final visit. Given what you've told me about your family's behavior, I recommend including a no-contest clause. If anyone challenges this will, they forfeit any potential inheritance entirely. Do it, David replied without hesitation. I want Emily protected from any legal harassment after I'm gone. As David's condition deteriorated, his family's behavior became even more telling. They visited frequently, but their conversations focused almost entirely on business matters and future plans for the property. I noticed them taking inventory of valuable items, discussing which furniture was original Morrison pieces, eyeing the antique grandfather clock in the hallway, making assumptions about what would happen after David died. Emily, dear, Catherine said one afternoon while David was napping upstairs. Have you given any thought to where you'll live afterward? This is my home, Catherine. I plan to stay here. She exchanged a look with William, who was examining our collection of Audubon prints. Well, of course, temporarily but long-term, you'll want to find something more suitable for a single woman. This house is really too large for one person. Plus, the upkeep is expensive, William added, running his hand along the crown molding. Family property requires family resources to maintain properly. I bit my tongue, remembering David's words about not revealing our legal preparations. But their presumption was infuriating. They were already mentally redistributing our life together, treating me like a temporary caretaker whose services would no longer be needed. The worst conversation happened 2 days before David died. Andrew and Christopher came to visit, ostensibly to see their brother, but I overheard them in the hallway making plans. Dad wants to start moving some of the valuable pieces out before the funeral, Andrew whispered. He's worried Emily might try to claim them. Smart thinking, Christopher replied. We should probably change the locks too, just to avoid any complications. What about the veterinary practice? Do we need to notify his patients about the transition? Dad's already contacted that new vet in Somerville. Dr. Richardson is interested in taking over the client list. I stood frozen outside David's room, listening to them plan the dismantling of our life while my husband lay dying just feet away. David died on a Tuesday morning in October, surrounded by the golden light filtering through our bedroom windows. I held his hand as he took his final breath, whispering how much I loved him and how grateful I was for the life we had shared. The funeral was held 2 days later at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, where we had been married 8 years earlier. The Morrison family took over the arrangements, pushing me aside as they planned what they considered appropriate for their son. I let them handle the details, knowing that soon enough their presumptions would catch up with them. "Emily, dear, you'll sit in the second row," Catherine informed me the morning of the service. "Family sits in the front row." I nodded quietly, choosing not to point out that I was his wife and therefore his closest family. Their behavior was providing me with even more evidence of their complete disregard for my place in David's life. After the service, William pulled me aside at the cemetery, Spanish moss swaying in the October breeze. "We'll give you a few days to grieve, Emily, but then we need to discuss practical matters. The house will need to be cleaned out, and we'll need time to prepare it for Andrew's family." "Andrew's family?" "He's been wanting to move back to Charleston," William explained matter-of-factly. "The house is perfect for them, and it keeps the property in the family where it belongs." That night, I stayed at my sister Karen's house in Somerville, needing space to process my grief without the additional stress of the Morrison family's expectations. Karen, who had never liked David's family, was furious when I told her about their plans. "They can't just kick you out of your own house," she exclaimed, nearly spilling her wine. "You were married to David for 8 years." "They seem very confident about their legal position," I replied calmly. "Well, they're wrong. You need to call a lawyer immediately." I smiled sadly at my sister's outrage. "Actually, Karen, David already took care of that." The next morning, I drove back to Charleston, planning to spend the day at the house, gathering my thoughts and beginning to sort through David's belongings. But as I turned onto our tree-lined street in the historic district, I saw William's Ford F-150 parked in our driveway alongside Andrew's Chevy Suburban. That I sat in my Honda Accord for a moment, watching through the front windows as figures moved around inside my home. They weren't waiting for permission or discussion. They were simply taking what they believed was rightfully theirs. That I pulled out my phone and dialed Benjamin Harper's office. "Benjamin, it's Emily Morrison. They're at the house now moving things out. Are you there?" "I'm sitting in my car outside. They don't know I'm here yet." "Perfect. Don't go inside alone. I'll be there in 20 minutes with copies of all the documents. Do you remember what David told you to do?" "Let them dig their hole deeper," I replied, recalling David's exact words. "Exactly. The more presumptuous they are, the clearer it becomes that David was right to protect you legally." I got out of my car and walked toward the house, ready to face whatever came next. That's when William's voice boomed through my living room. "This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags and get out." And now, standing in my doorway watching them loot my home, I saw Benjamin Harper's silver Lexus pull into the driveway. William's face went pale as he recognized the prominent estate attorney stepping out of the car with a briefcase full of legal documents. "Mr. Morrison," Benjamin called out as he approached the front door. "I'm Benjamin Harper, David's attorney. I believe we need to have a conversation." "I don't understand," William stammered. "What's this about?" Benjamin looked around at the furniture being loaded into trucks, then back at William with professional calm. "It's about the fact that you're currently removing property that belongs to Emily Morrison, and you need to stop immediately." Andrew dropped the box he was carrying, my grandmother's china rattling inside. "What are you talking about? This is family property." "Actually," Benjamin replied, opening his briefcase on our dining room table. "Legally speaking, everything you've touched today belongs to Emily. David left a comprehensive will, and I have the documentation right here." Benjamin spread the legal documents across the table while the Morrison men gathered around, their confident expressions rapidly changing to confusion and then anger. "This will, dated 6 months ago and properly witnessed, leaves everything to Emily Morrison," Benjamin explained methodically. "The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments, and personal property. Everything." William's face turned crimson. "That's impossible. Family property has been passed down for generations. You can't just give it away to outsiders." "Mr. Morrison, your son owned this property outright. He could leave it to whomever he chose, and he chose his wife. But she's not blood family, Catherine protested. Benjamin pulled out another document. Actually, under South Carolina law, spouses have automatic inheritance rights that supersede any family traditions. But more importantly, David also changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. Even without the will, everything would have gone to Emily automatically. The room fell silent except for the sound of Catherine's sharp breathing. William slumped into a chair, the weight of his miscalculation finally hitting him. There's more, Benjamin continued, pulling out David's letter. David also left detailed instructions about why he made these decisions. He began reading aloud, and with every word, I watched the Morrison family's certainty crumble. David had documented everything. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every conversation where they'd planned my departure, as if I were nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Furthermore, Benjamin said, David included a no-contest clause. Any attempt to challenge this will result in the forfeiture of any potential inheritance. In that moment, standing in the home David and I had shared, surrounded by the family who had never believed I belonged, I understood the full depth of my husband's final act of love. He hadn't just protected me legally, he had validated that our marriage, our life together, had been real and worthy of fierce protection. The Morrison family left that day with nothing but the shame of their own assumptions. And as I watched them drive away, I realized David's greatest gift wasn't the house or the money. It was the proof that love, quiet, steady, observant love, sees everything and protects what matters most.